Welcome to Unlayered. I'm Saul, joined by my co-host here, Dave, and today we are speaking with Michael Wagner, founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO of Star Atlas, a game I think a lot of our audience has heard of and is familiar with, and has recently been kind of on a tear in terms of on-chain activity on Solana. Super excited to speak with you today, Michael. How's everything going? I'm sure pretty hectic, right?
Everything's going great. It is pretty hectic right now. A lot of people in the Solana ecosystem are full steam ahead preparing for Breakpoint. I'm super excited for next week, but we have a lot to show off then, and all the hard work's going to pay off. But excited to be here with you guys today as well.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, going to be a crazy week, and yeah, I guess maybe we can start there. Is Breakpoint kind of a big kind of checkpoint? Are you guys releasing a bunch of new stuff that hasn't been seen yet? How are you treating that date?
We have historically, and we will continue to treat Breakpoint as a major kind of feature release debut opportunity for us. So it's one of the big conferences that we attend each year. Of course, there's a lot of game conferences and games industry conferences, GDC, for example,
Right.
in kind of end of Q1, Q2. But for us, really trying to educate and inspire the Solana community, and specifically the Solana community of developers, because I'm sure we'll get into this, but a big part of our philosophy and thesis is around creating this games ecosystem, but development platform that enables people to build alongside us in much the same way that a layer one protocol does. And so making sure we captivate that crypto audience, that Solana community, and encourage people not only to play the game, but to build with us is critical, especially at this stage of development. So we tailor and target a lot of our major releases around the Breakpoint conference. That's what we did last year. Catch 22 last year, we had this really euphoric moment, really
Yes.
successful keynote
Oh,
presentation and some demonstrations at the at the Games Day event, and then everything comes crashing down shortly thereafter. So
yeah.
kind of a tough time last year, but really excited about what we have lined up this year and where things are going in crypto more broadly.
Are they doing another Games Day before the start of Breakpoint again?
They're not doing a Games Day at Breakpoint this year. There was a Play GG event, which was hosted by the Solana Games team that was in San Diego back in July. So we were present and presenting there, but no games presentations specifically at this Breakpoint.
Well, hopefully this time nothing else could go wrong, right? There's nothing left to go wrong, so we'll just keep riding that positive momentum, especially now that Solana's up a lot, Bitcoin's up a lot this past week or so. So let's just keep that going, and I think the vibes will be strong.
Yeah, the you can definitely see the enthusiasm coming back into the markets, and all it took really was one green day, but it was
Yeah.
one kind of big green day. So I do hope it's sustainable from here. Not to derail us and get too deep into the kind of macro crypto discussion, but
That's fine.
all of this talk about like Bitcoin, ETF, and we're
Mhm.
obviously seeing the institutional interest and VC capital starting to recirculate now, and interest in investing is coming back, and it just seems like all of the cards are lined up, or in the stars, I guess I would say. And
Yeah.
having been in the space for a long time, having ridden through a lot of these cycles, these ups and downs, just my intuition, my gut feeling is things are looking promising for 2024 and beyond. Obviously, you've got the Bitcoin halving next year as well. So we think that's all really exciting. But for us specifically at Star Atlas, having been in development now for just about 3 years, we debuted with a white paper and a dream in January of 2021. We've been hard at work building a ton of infrastructure for ourselves, but also
Mhm.
gaming implementations for the Star Atlas universe. And so I think we're just extremely well positioned between the product suite that we have available, and we're seeing this kind of macro environment improve. So um, couldn't be more excited. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start, actually. And maybe I'll preface this by saying I did a pretty big research report on gaming, the history of gaming, its Web3 future last year for Galaxy when I worked there. Got a lot of great responses to it, did a tweet thread summarizing it too, and kind of learned a lot about what to think about in terms of the intersection of gaming and Web3. I want to learn a bit more, and I think it gets lost on a lot of people, the fact that it's just really hard to build games. They're it's not like you're building an app, right? You have to all these animations, you have artists making things, you have pre-rendered stuff. You have the actual you're integrating with game engines. It's really complex code, and it's a lot of things that have to happen. Physics engines, things like that. It takes years. To your point, let's start with that journey. How did you decide, one day to kind of embark on this journey with Start Atlas, and what has that journey been like over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a story I've shared quite a bit. As I said, I've been in the space for about a decade now, and
Hmm.
I will kind of spare you all of the background and detail. I do come from the financial industry, so I'm the first to admit I'm not you know, experienced in game development myself from the
Hmm.
actual studio side of things. But it was really through the formation of my first company back in 2016 that, and an acquisition of another company, this was in the crypto and cannabis space, that I hired on two guys named Danny Floyd and Jacob Floyd. Danny's our chief product officer, Jacob's our chief technology officer, and we were working on point of sale software and a payment suite that provided financial services to that legal cannabis industry. We've always got along really well. Now, we had some successes with that previous company. Pandemic hit, COVID hit in end of 2019, 2020. We had some doors close on us, some opportunities evaporate on us at Tokes, and it was then that I sat down with both Danny and Jacob and started discussing the potential for building out a gaming product, given the trends and the momentum that we had seen in NFTs and DeFi, and to some extent this very nascent early stage crypto gaming concept. Axie was already around, but a lot of the games that we were seeing were fairly rudimentary, weren't really what we would describe as fun. Now, card style games, a lot of people really enjoy those. Turn-based games, people really
Sure.
enjoy those.
Hmm.
But where I benefit in the co-founding team is Danny's got 20 years of experience in AAA game development. So this guy is our chief product officer, game director, leads all the art directors, wrote the lore, understands how to build a high quality AAA game. And that was the biggest differentiator that we saw as the potential, especially in the market at the time, was nobody's building anything of the caliber of AAA that would be attractive to a mainstream audience.
Hmm.
And our thesis from very early on was that um, uh, gaming itself could be a major catalyst for growth within the crypto space and the blockchain ecosystem, simply because we're developing out an entertainment product that has intrinsic utility, that has value for players that people want to engage in and want to spend their time in. And it's a more powerful motivator than, say, the finance side of things, which has been the core product market fit, if you can even call it that. The motivation for most people to get into crypto is trading, speculating, right? And
Right.
DeFi to some extent was like, how do I kind of gamify this yield aspect? And I think DeFi actually was one of the earliest Web3 gaming concepts, because
Hmm.
you're
Sure.
able to, leverage and pull liquidity off one platform, deposit that to another platform, lever that up again. And there's this whole strategy around how do I maximize the yield that I have with the asset base that I'm working with. But the big differentiator for us was we can build a AAA quality game. We can bring that to the Web3 space, but we can actually do so much more with it because of the blockchain integration. And it's in, the first part of that is NFTs with the true asset ownership and ability to trade freely with other users, other players. The economy integration is fundamental to our platform in
Hmm.
building out what I've often described as this idea of the metaverse, but what I've often described is operating similar to the way that a nation state, a government, a country
Hmm.
would operate. We can create a functional system of governance
Hmm.
with a functional financial system that has open access to this alternative financial ecosystem that is crypto and all of the tools and dApps and services that are available there. But where we really distinguish ourselves is taking advantage of and leveraging the blockchain itself, in our case, Solana, um, the ability to abstract game logic from an engine, so from Unreal Engine or say Play Canvas, we build in both, and build that in the form of Solana programs or smart contracts. And the benefit in doing that is exactly what I was describing at the beginning. When you have a composable and extensible ecosystem of on-chain programs, now other developers from around the world are able to integrate seamlessly into that, build their own applications, build their own services, operate with our gameplay mechanics. And we see this as very much a win-win-win scenario where we have creativity and innovation going on in the form of development. Our players get access to new features, and those developers have a path to monetizing whatever service they're providing, but they have the additional benefit of leveraging assets that we've created through our build program and through our repository. So a fast track to be able to essentially use the highest quality and highest caliber assets that are available in gaming today in some application. And I could get further into that, but
Sure.
Ultimately it's been a wild journey. 2021 was a great year to launch. There was obviously a lot of euphoria in the markets at the time, and our concept really struck a chord. This grand strategy, space exploration, open world MMO, where you can effectively, navigate and explore an open universe, but it also has all of the implications of this crypto and financial components where it's real value being created and real value being captured.
For sure. So I want to kind of highlight a few things, rabbit holes that we should probably go down, because there's a lot to unpack here. One is the economic side. How do you structure an economy for a game and do it correctly without producing, side effects that could hurt the ecosystem? But before we even get into that, let's start with this. And you mentioned this a couple times now, which is this idea that, we're a AAA game, we're building with blockchain primitives. That means other developers can tap into that because it's permissionless and it's on-chain. So did that weigh into your decision to use Solana specifically, because Solana is a composable, scalable L1 versus, because I think I hear a lot about developers considering subnets on Avalanche or app chains or things like that. And I've always wondered, and I've written about this in my piece that I did last year, is like, it's unclear to me why someone would want to do that, because you lose a lot of the benefits of blockchain if you silo everything off into a subnet or an app chain. You lose that composability. It just feels like a slightly better database. What are your thoughts from the perspective of someone who's now built a game on chain? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question I honestly haven't answered in quite a while. It was a common question in when we first launched in 2021, which is like, why did you pick Solana? And the primary benefits that we were looking for was this high transaction throughput, low cost, and low latency. The low latency is so sub-second finality. 400 milliseconds on Solana was highly promoted all the way back then. The latency component is incredibly important when you're developing a game. We're all familiar with the concept of latency if you're a gamer in the form of lag, right? You don't want lag. And what we're building is this immersive. Your ping, yeah. And that's especially important when you have transactions, game actions actually executing as transactions on the chain, and you need to be able to read that data back and also reflect that data in whatever environment it is. Now, that could be Unreal Engine, or it could be a browser-based application like we have. But our goal, our objective has always been real-time. We want real-time strategy, real-time MMO. And that means if you're waiting a second or a minute for a transaction to update in a block and be able to read that data back and reflect that action in the game, it's never going to work. It's never going to feel real-time, right? So the latency component was super important for us. I would be lying if I didn't say there was already some momentum and hype behind Solana when we chose it as well. So that was a part of it. It was like identifying what is possibly going to be the next wave. And I would say we certainly got that one right. Many thanks to Solana and everything that they've done. But I guess the final part of this, and I'm not an engineer or a developer, but the code base being Rust is comparable in many ways to C++, which is often used in game development. So thinking through, what is going to be compatible with an Unreal Engine based game, and code bases being similar, there was some benefit there. But to your exact point, we also want it to be directly on the layer one, the composability. Everybody else building on the layer one, well, we're just a part of that ecosystem. So we're not asking people to come to an alternative chain to build alongside us. And the motto that I've been running with is, because we do want to recruit developers, is building on Star Atlas is building on Solana. It's one and the same. Like if you're thinking about building an application today on Solana, well, we have this captive audience of gamers who are looking for new features. Build something for us. And you have an immediate user base that is probably going to want to use whatever it is you built, assuming that it adds value to that user base. So all of those things went into the decision, and I've been a staunch advocate of Solana through everything, even with, when there were periods of downtime and all the FUD going around and all this stuff with FTX. my position, in my opinion, has never changed on Solana, which is this is the most advanced chain that's capable of providing real-time game services.
Because obviously you have the option of forking the SVM as MakerDAO are proposing. And at the moment, I think transactions from Star Atlas are taking up about 15% of all of the user transactions currently on Solana. So, I mean, I'd just be interested just to double click on that point about the composability piece. What sort of things do you think Solana specifically can give you? Is it about having access to greater liquidity, maybe outside the game, AMMs, or is it something else, some other sort of application that you could see interacting?
Well, so AMMs and like any DeFi applications that are out there do add value to our players. It can be, it can encourage players to say retain assets that they've earned in game. So in our case, Atlas or Polis, right, the in-game currency and the governance token. But if you're earning those tokens and you're looking for a way to retain those and retain store of value with those, rather than immediately extracting value in the form of, say, converting that into USDC or some other currency, well, to the extent that there are services out there that allow you to lend that out and pick up yield on it, or to participate in an AMM, again, pick up yield, those are powerful features for our users. What I'm really looking forward to is the creation and development of a scholarship system, similar to what YGG did with Axie, but this can come in the form of a pure lending protocol, so collateral-free lending protocol, a rental system, or just pure scholarships. We're actually doing some primitive work ourselves on a profile and account architecture system that allows us to permissionlessly lend assets without risk of without counterparty risk. But you know, all of these things add value to our player base, and we're Sal, you mentioned, you know, building a game is, especially a AAA game, is very difficult. So where do we focus our attention and our energy? Well, it's on building the core product that is going to attract the users, and that's the entertainment experience. But because of the composability, now our users have access to this wide feature set that other builders in the space are working on. So those are some of the core types of, I would say, crypto systems that I think are valuable. We also have a vision, though, for enabling modding or extensions of the game itself. I've often referred to, you know, somebody using some of the Star Atlas art assets that are available in that build repository to create their own version of the game. And in fact, people are already building their own UI around our game systems, these 7 programs that we've deployed for Sage Labs. And so if you know, maybe you don't want a real-time strategy game, you want some alternative version of that, or just some different UI implementation over top of it, anybody can build that now and interact with those same programs, and they can also leverage those same assets that we've already created that reference back to the assets that our users possess to build some feature. Modding is huge. I used to be really big into a variety of StarCraft mods. I think, you know, everybody knows the story of Counter-Strike, but it's one of the most popular games of all time. Started as a mod of Half-Life. So we see massive potential in modding, but also massive potential in empowering these other studios to build extensions and versions of our game, of the Star Atlas universe, that benefit them, but also benefit us and our users.
I think it'd be interesting just to double click slightly more on this modding and how it happens in sort of Web 2 gaming, if you like. Because as I understand it, people can create mods of these things, but generally they're not allowed to use the IP. They have to just go and create a completely different game. They don't have access to the users from the original game, which they're modding. And you basically just have to start again. And do you think then that building in Web3 all on-chain helps to sort of overcome those issues and helps to bring the community in more?
I don't think Web3 intrinsically improves that kind of scenario. I think it's philosophically, I think Web3 is lower barrier to entry, less walled gardens, more permissibility and use of assets. I've also pointed to Yuga Labs historically and kind of what they've been able to do with the Bored Apes. And if you own this NFT, you can kind of create a business out of that. Our approach and philosophy is fairly similar to that. We have an IP program within that build repository, so you can access a variety of art assets and branding and logos to create your own business out of. We've actually had over 50 different applications to this program. We have probably 10 businesses up and running. I could name a few. GalliaMerchants.com, for example. These guys produce T-shirts and computer peripherals and other forms of accessories that you can buy, all with the Star Atlas brand. Gallia Art Station. They produce 3D printed models of our ships. Enigma 42 is another individual that produces 3D models of our ships. Star Artisan Merchants. This is like jewelry and placards and kind of trinkets. So, and we have Dark Core Roasters, which is a coffee brand that uses the Star Atlas branding. So I wouldn't say Web3 again intrinsically fixes the IP restrictions. It's the companies that are in this space, I think, understand the potential of empowering people to build with your brand, and are more liberal with accessing that. So we don't see it as a bad thing. We don't feel the necessity to retain full ownership over all of our IP, simply because we can grow at an exponential rate if we empower a global population to build with us or to leverage the branding. It's kind of pace of growth over retained ownership of the IP. Now, on that build program with the IP access, there's no royalty fees or revenue share whatsoever for the first $1 million in revenue. And then it ranges from 3 to 10% depending on the industry. So we do have long-term upside potential in that we can capture residual cash flows off of any of these brands. But the key point is $1 million in revenue is relatively challenging for a startup to accomplish. So let's give them an opportunity to work with this IP. And if they're successful, then we succeed alongside them. But in the meantime, here's kind of free access and free use to test out your concept.
Yeah. So in terms of the gaming industry, because I think this is a point that I wanted to touch on a bit in terms of what's happening, I guess, in Web 2. Fortnite recently, or Epic Games rather, creators of Fortnite announced recently, there's going to be some payout structure because you can customize and create your own games in Fortnite, and people will be earning V-Bucks from some pool of like the monthly revenues, which is an interesting concept. And, I guess the most interesting about it is the fact that it doesn't require Web 2 to do it. They have a user base and they're finding some way. Now, obviously, they're probably not making as much as they would if it was fully decentralized. I think the pool is like 40% of revenues, but it's something. So I think what we're going to see is, can Web3 outcompete the attempts at Web2 to enable these new user behaviors, what I call meta games, where you're effectively building on top of an existing game with your creative user base and keeping them inside. So the reason I bring all this up is a couple things. One, gaming is clearly an important industry. It makes 3 times as much money as music and 4 times as much as movies. That is the future. I think people are going to continue to hang out in those venues. The question becomes, is it possible to scalably create an economy for a successful game that has exit valves where people can move assets in and out freely? Historically, we've never seen this work super well. We've seen it work for like a month or two with Axie and Step In. But as we just saw with Epic Games, they keep everything in-house and they scale to be really big. What's your take on that? Is that a feature or a bug? Like, do you think, no, there is a way we can kind of allow these exit valves to exist and balance the economy? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, this is, again, fundamental and foundational to everything that we've built, is we want to create a sustainable, functional, real-world economy throughout the universe of Star Atlas. So it's gone into design principles from day one. And it is one of the biggest benefits and advantages that we see to the integration of crypto into gaming. Now, from our perspective, I actually love this topic because there's been a narrative, especially over the last year and a half or so, that play to earn is dead. And I think it's a bit semantic if you want to say play and earn or play and own. To me, it's all the same, right? It's like, is there a method for a player to extract value based on time contributed or time spent in the game? And I adamantly believe that it can exist and can persist, but it's a question of how you implement that. And where we've seen shortfalls in the past is through these hyperinflationary reward mechanisms that attract users. Sure, if you're paying 1,000% ROI to someone, you're going to get a bunch of people into that game that want to play. But what happens with all of that inflation going into the economy? Certainly not sustainable. And then you see these massive collapses as a result. I think the presentation should not be based on here's yield through an inflation curve that you can earn, and therefore that's a reason why you should play. Our focus and our emphasis is on how do we create a player-to-player, consumer and producer-driven economy. So in transparency, we do have an inflation curve, which is a bootstrapping mechanism, but it's 8% of the total supply per year. So it's a much lower rate. But ultimately, we want to get to this creator and UGC-based economy. And I can give you kind of one example. Now, we haven't really covered all of the different implementations, but we have our flagship MMO. That's an Unreal Engine 5. We have a browser-based application that's called Sage, Star Atlas Golden Era. Mm-hmm. And then we also have a mobile fitness app, kind of a move to earn, but really move to progress of your character, where you can level it up by walking, running, or cycling. Now, all of these synchronize because they all tap into Solana and these on-chain game systems. But let's say, for example, you're playing Sage or Sage Labs, which is where we're seeing all of these transactions right now. This is based on using your ships, forming fleets, going out and mining celestial bodies, extracting resources, and then using those in crafting recipes. And you can produce items or compound materials or other forms of refined materials. Now, all of the materials that are being extracted in Sage Labs have applicability within the mobile app and with Unreal Engine as well. Now, in our Unreal Engine client, we're calling this the showroom release. This is kind of iterative releases as we get to the full AAA V1 product. The big release that's up and coming is a competitive combat racing gameplay loop. So massive or super massive multiplayer scale. I don't want to derail us again, but we have a great partnership with Metagravity. We're right now playtesting 30,000 concurrent users, single server, and so imagine you're in this combat racing gameplay loop and you're consuming ammunition, you're consuming fuel, you're consuming toolkits. Well, all of those resources need to be produced or manufactured by users. We don't sell those. Our studio doesn't sell those. And so right now, people are in Sage Labs extracting resources, crafting those items, and they'll be able to sell those to players who are maybe just interested in the racing gameplay loop. Maybe they don't want to set up logistics and supply chain management. They want to compete in racing tournaments and maybe win Atlas if they're successful in that race, right? Now they're earning some Atlas and they're using that to purchase these resources from other players that are creating them and crafting them. And these same mechanics will be available in Unreal Engine, but I'm just describing kind of the current dynamic of how things are operating. The key point of this is that because we're not the exclusive seller of all game items, which is how all web studios work. You're expressly prohibited from trading or transacting in any of the items that you've collected in a game. We are creating this producer-consumer economy where now players are able to produce their income, their yield, if you will, but from other players who want to purchase either convenience or items that they need, right? That to me is what's going to be sustainable. And of course, you still need a mixture of players that are willing to come in and buy items. And I can't say with certainty, but this could very well be a mainstream gamer who would otherwise be comfortable spending $10 or $20 per month to play a game. Maybe they don't care about how much am I earning from this. And then you have the other more extractive-based mentality, which is I want to earn as much Atlas or currency as I can. And it's pairing those two together. Now, it's not about inflation. It's about the currency exchange between two users and the transfer of value directly between these two users. That, to me, is the future. It's only through the creation of this type of economy where users are transacting with one another and not based on inflation that we can see a sustainable future in this.
It does remind me a little bit of Axie Infinity, how you had all these people in the Philippines, apparently, I think, leveling up, and then people from other countries were basically paying them to do it on their behalf. So I don't know, a couple of things around that. Firstly, is it basically going to be just dependent on the price of the relevant token to ensure that people are actually prepared to do this work? And then the other part would be about botting. Is this going to be just an absolute playground for people to set up bots to do it on their behalf and basically just print money? And what impacts that going to have?
So those are two hot button issues. I do want to get into the automation and botting. In terms of sustainability, again, it's and I don't criticize or disparage Axie whatsoever in their model, but their model was based on a high inflation rate. So the reason why people were paying scholars to do work was because the scholars were able to produce a high yield on the time that they were spending in game. And what I'm suggesting is that that high yield through inflation, that isn't going to work in the long term. But if you have players that are renting ships and maybe able to earn some Atlas, and they're exchanging a unit of currency that is the base purchasing power currency throughout the universe, Atlas, they're exchanging that with other players, well, to some extent, that exchange rate is going to fluctuate along with the external exchange rate. So Atlas to USD, people will incorporate that into whatever their price they're selling something for, right? And if it goes up, they'll probably collect less of that unit of currency. If it goes down, they'll collect more of that unit of currency, but it kind of naturally balances itself out. However, my objective with the Star Atlas economy is to instill in people confidence that the unit of account that they're earning is a store of value. The example that I've given is, we all probably get a salary in some form. You get a paycheck. When you get your paycheck, you're not thinking about, hey, I want to convert my US dollars into the euro immediately every time I get it. You say, well, I have utility with my currency in the economy. I can go buy things. I can pay my rent. I can pay my car lease, things like that. Well, to the extent that people have confidence that their purchasing power and the currency that they're earning is sustainable and stable to some extent, then they're not going to be thinking about, I need to convert this into something else so that I can extract the value. They're going to say, well, I earned Atlas, but I can also do all of these things with Atlas in the game. And in fact, I need Atlas to do a lot of the things in the game. So I need to save that, right? So I can purchase stuff in the future. This is a mentality that I don't think has been successfully implemented in really any gaming, Web3 gaming ecosystem yet, but it's something that we're working hard to accomplish. I would also note that we have a very talented economics team at Star Atlas as well. Our head of game economy, for example, Chris Smith, is a PhD in economics. His thesis was on labor markets. So we're thinking about, and like within our quarterly state of the economy report, we produce things like census data where we categorize the different users across our ecosystem in terms of, call it, this is terminology that's used commonly in economics, but like foreign direct investors, or do we have, citizen? Do we have, blanking on some of the other terms right now, but, thinking about how we categorize our users and what assets they hold and how do they participate? Do they actually engage in activity, or do they just hold the currency? Do they participate in governance? So we think about all of these things, and we've structured our economics team to function in much the same way that a real world economist would think about a national economy. Now, on the topic of botting and automation, because it is very controversial. A lot of traditional gamers would say we don't want to see bots on games. Now, building game logic on the blockchain in a permissionless capacity intrinsically means that people are going to be able to automate certain processes within our ecosystem. Almost impossible to combat that, right? We also don't necessarily think it's necessary to completely combat that or to block that from happening. In fact, what we want to see, what gamers don't like is being disadvantaged. They don't want somebody else to be able to leverage technology to have a superior advantage in the game from them. So what we've said so far, and this is all still very experimental, but we've said if you're going to create a bot that automates any function within the game, we would like to see you open source that and make that accessible to all of the players. And to the extent that everybody is on a fair playing ground and everybody has access to the same features, then nobody's at a disadvantage. And if you've automated a certain game function within our game that we don't already have as an automated process, well, we probably need to learn from that. Because if you don't want to fly around and one of the mechanics is scanning for these survey data units. But if you don't want to move your ship around and scan for these because you don't find that entertaining, well, we need to fix that mechanic. If you're not having fun playing the game, then we didn't release it properly, right? So to the extent that automation is happening, we're encouraging people to come out publicly and share any tools that they've created and just make it available to everyone else. And to that end, we're not taking an aggressive position on banning people or anything like that. I mean, we really do operate under the crypto philosophy of self-sovereign ownership of your assets. You possess them. You can do what you want with them. We don't want to get into the position of like freezing accounts or locking assets or anything like that. So, it's really just incumbent on us to develop game systems in a way that don't create opportunities for disadvantageous operations, but otherwise encouraging people to create their own systems and then making that available to the rest of the user base.
I remember back in my RuneScape days, botting was such a nuisance. They would just take over your tree or your rock that you're trying to mine, and this lifeless body is just hacking away at it. So I guess that's to say it's not a new thing with crypto. It's kind of been around, the gaming world for a long time, and a lot of approaches been taken to get rid of them. But I think it's pretty elegant to just, hey, just enable anyone to have access to a bot, level the playing field, and maybe just kind of elevate above that. One point I want to go back to that you brought up just now is this idea of classifying different player personas, let's call them. And there's a guy in the 90s, Bartle, who created these 4 buckets that I resonated with a lot, and I referenced in my report. And so let me just quickly go through them, then I'll get your reaction to it. But basically, his philosophy was there's 4 buckets or 4 player types. You have socializers. They're about 80% of players. Their motivations are belonging and collaborating. Explorers, 10% of players. Motivations are discovery. Achievers, another about 10%, and their motivations are about completionism, getting rewards, trophies, things like that. And then there's 1% that are, he calls them killers, and their motivations are glory and thrill. And the reason why I thought this is really cool is because I think it also kind of explains the rise of free-to-play in the mobile era, 2010s onwards, which became kind of the meta, highest grossing games are these mobile games that people can try out for free. Then there's in-app purchases, and that ended up driving a lot of revenue. So, with that in mind, that historical context, how do you view those frameworks? Do you think the future of gaming is going to look a lot different from that? Or do you think there's things we can learn from those?
Yeah. Just quickly on your reference to RuneScape, by the way, I mean, just to be clear, like every game and every game system in the history of time has been exploited by someone. So it's an extremely uphill battle that you're trying to fight if you want to prevent that from happening. And so I think, again, embracing it and empowering people and then modifying our game systems around how people are interacting with it is probably going to be the most successful long-term approach.
For sure.
The Bartle quadrants we do reference in all of our game design documents. And
nice.
I as much as they are a framework for game development, game design, they're really psychology frameworks. And so I would say to your question that I don't think that that's going to dramatically change through time, regardless of what the evolution of gaming looks like, because these are just deep mental traits that people possess. And so understanding the psychology of people will help us design systems that motivate and, drive that dopamine response and the type of activities and actions that they're interested in engaging in. For us, what's really cool is, we have this whole universe that people can explore, which is something that really inspires people. The idea of traveling to a distant land and discovering something that nobody's ever discovered before. The other benefit that we have, and where I think we can really satisfy all of those human desires and the things, again, that drive them, is deep layers of complexity throughout the game. It's hard to build. Like a mobile free-to-play app is obviously dramatically different from how you engage in most MMOs. But how can you build out systems that cater to that same mobile player, quick click player, and yet also satisfy the people who are interested in getting deep into the weeds, like an EVE Online player where they're analyzing spreadsheets and they're looking at commodities markets. And most of the time they're actually playing the game, they're probably trading these in-game markets versus going out and engaging in combat or, going out and mining. And so we're developing out these deep systems of complexity so that players can get as sophisticated as they want with the game. If you just want some quick action, and in fact, Danny's categorizing us as a simcade, and I don't know if that's a term that's ever been used before in gaming, but it's It's kind of a hybrid between full space simulation, kind of Star Citizen, where it's fairly complicated and time consuming just to get up and running, to get into your ship, to even get out into space. It might take you 30 minutes. Like Star Citizen was an inspiration for us, and I think it's a great game. But I know when I first logged on, I spent 45 minutes running around the space station trying to figure out where my ship was, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like a hybrid
That
between
onboarding.
strong space simulation and realistic physics with quick action. So kind of like an arcade, being able to get in and immediately start playing if you want to. And we can do that through different gameplay modalities as well. PvP, combat arena, 5v5, team combat, or getting into one of these races in the showroom, for example. You can jump in and start playing right away if you want to, or you can take time and analyze markets, and you can analyze resource availability and competitiveness in a particular region of space, or the local jurisdictional politics in a region of space. A lot of this is conceptual still, but you can look at these things and say, okay, well, this is where the biggest opportunity lies. And so depending on, again, what motivates you in gameplay and what activity most provides the most entertainment value for you, you can do those things. So that was kind of a long way to answer the question on the Bartle quadrants, but importantly, I think that we're able to satisfy a lot of those emotional demands players will have.
For sure.
I was listening to the Good Game pod a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about Dark Forest on Ethereum. And just in terms of, I'd just like to get into how much is on-chain, because their sort of summation was that you can't possibly have a first-person shooter or any game really with any sort of action fully on-chain, because obviously all of the movements would need to be recorded on-chain, but also they were talking about like the state of what's on your screen. If it's like a shooter, you need to know what's on your screen because you're obviously shooting, and then everyone else needs to react to every move that you make, and their screen needs to change for that. So yeah, it'd be really interesting just to get into how much is on chain, and how are you managing it?
Yeah, it's a little bit different depending on which game engine you're working in. So something like an Unreal Engine game, first-person shooter, or even MMO, there's some restrictions to what can be recorded on chain. Let me start with Sage Labs. That's the big product release we rolled out in September, and so everything from when you first log into the game, you connect a wallet. You don't create an account, you connect a wallet. You create a profile. You name your character. You're going to be able to earn XP, loyalty points, and character progression as a result. That's one on-chain program. Fleet formation is another program. So your fleet composition and ships that you add to a particular fleet. Inventory management systems, resource extraction systems, the crafting systems, localized inventory and localized markets. So like when you're in the map on Sage Labs, if you're at one star base, call it MRZ 36, the assets that you have on deposit at that star base are not accessible if you're at the central space station. So everything is localized. All of your resources and assets are localized based on a Cartesian coordinate system. All of this is on chain. We're also building out combat systems on chain. Now in Sage Labs, these are likely to be deterministic combat systems. Whereas when you start to transition into Unreal Engine, you can't execute all of those things necessarily real time, but what we can still do is reference the same programs like the resource extraction, crafting systems, where these are really more discrete. So you can click to craft an item, and it takes a period of time for that to complete. If you get into combat situations, it's more of like, what is the outcome of a combat situation? And then that event can get recorded on chain. The outcome of a race, for example. Sure, while you're moving and every bullet you shoot, that's not recorded on chain. That's not feasible. But if you get into a space battle with someone and you destroy the other player, well, that event then gets recorded on chain. And whatever the consequences of that event are recorded on chain. The other things that we've added right now are, one, we built an SDK we call the F-Kit, and this is native Solana integration into UE5. So we built a wallet with this. So the same thing, when you download the showroom client on Epic Game Store, you log into the game, you connect a wallet. It pulls up all of your assets, and the assets that you own, those are the assets that you're able to use in the game. We've also built in the marketplace, so you can do free trading with all users peer-to-peer on that marketplace directly while you're in Unreal Engine S5. 5 as well. And the objective long term is to synchronize as many of the on-chain game systems that are operating within, say, Sage or the mobile app. Crew members, for example, same thing. These are assets that work in the mobile app. You slot them into your ship on in either Sage or in Unreal Engine in the form of ship configuration and loadout, your components, crew members, modules, etc. These are all actions that you take when you set a loadout that's recorded on chain. It's just some of the more dynamic, real-time player versus player activity in Unreal Engine 5. That can't be recorded real-time, but we can do this event sequence where we know the outcome of these, and then that gets recorded on chain, and we have the historic provenance of that going into the future.
And is there any issue if you have the game logic on chain in terms of people being able to see secrets or anything? Do you need to think about zero knowledge technology to try and obfuscate?
We absolutely do need to think about zero knowledge because so we don't have combat implemented into Sage yet. One of the blockers for that is, to your exact point, anybody can query the blockchain and say, well, I know where every fleet on the map is located right now. And I also know how big that fleet is and how much firepower that is. Oh, and I also know if it's holding any inventory right now. I know that this fleet just went and harvested resources and it's got a full inventory. That's the fleet that I want to go kill because I'm capable of doing that. So we are doing some early research now on how we can obfuscate that through zero knowledge. I think that's going to be incredibly important in the future. You obviously, and we need to create what is effectively a fog of war type system to hide player assets while still creating those gameplay mechanics like combat that we want to have on chain.
So one of the trends I'm noticing, kind of stepping a bit outside the crypto side of gaming, just broadly speaking, PCs are getting increasingly popular, and on the flip side, consoles, like the difference between each generation, I feel like is getting more and more marginal, and maybe that has to do with kind of that shift they made over to a different architecture after, like, I think the PS3 era, just because developers weren't willing to learn an entire new paradigm quick enough, even though the unlock was massive. But I guess what I'm noticing though is, like, if you didn't buy a PS5, for instance, and you just kept your PS4, one, every game is still being released on PS4. Two, people don't really notice or care to upgrade. And then three, a lot of people are now just moving over to PC, and they have like this interoperability on the back end where you can play Call of Duty with someone on Xbox or PC or PS5 or whatever on the same instance. And so they're kind of unifying there. I'm just curious, like, in terms of crypto, we're obviously a bit tethered to, I guess, games that are on the computer or the browser, just because the wallet infrastructure is, it's permissionless to build there, so you can have access to users' wallets, and we can't really build a wallet in a console unless Sony or Microsoft signs off on it. I think they are working on this stuff, behind closed doors, but it's not available to developers yet. How do you see the future of gaming playing out, like, in terms of the venue? Do you think it's going to be more on the PC side, the browser side? Do you think consoles will have their day again and start integrating Web3? Like, how do you see this playing out?
I think consoles still dominate the market in terms of total active players. I think the cost of a console is just generally considerably lower than building a real high-end gaming PC. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting next to a $5,000 machine right now that I built from the ground up just because I'm an enthusiast and I enjoy doing it. But for most people, they don't want to build their own computer. They want something that works out of the box, and consoles cater to that. Plus, you've got your big screen TV, and it's kind of just fun to sit in the living room with people next to you while you're playing. So I think that's a social element of console gaming that's difficult to compete with on PC. We'll see if PCs get cheaper through time, or rather the hardware improves to a place where it's easier to play these really high-end games. But this is always kind of a race as well. The hardware gets better, and then you build better graphical fidelity. At what point does that top out where it's like, okay, we've got the best we're going to get now, without just being a full simulation, like universe simulation. We have an interest in deploying to console. I think there are some challenges with the wallet integration into console. Free idea out there for anyone who's interested, and maybe people are already thinking about this, but I don't think we're going to pursue it. we had some conversations with the hardware wallet provider about building Seed Vault into like a controller, right? So you're playing the game with a controller, and when you need to sign a transaction, you can just immediately sign that transaction. There are some software solutions to this too, by the way, that might be viable for both cloud computing, which I think will cloud computing is going to completely dominate the home PC market in the future when you have remote rendering and streaming to people's devices. Some complexity with where the private key is stored when you're doing cloud computing and also signing transactions. But part of this profile system that we've developed in this account architecture that we've developed is the idea of a game session hot wallet. So store all of your assets on a ledger or on a hardware device. When you log into the game, it facilitates a transfer or some type of proxy reference to the assets that you own. And then that game session wallet, you can configure permissions on as well. So the types of things that an asset can do, where it can be transferred, can it be sold on the marketplace? Can it go into high risk space, for example? This also caters to that lending market again, where I don't have to worry about my assets ever being stolen from me because there's a limited time that it can sit in this wallet. The user can only engage with that asset for gameplay, and then it automatically returns back to me at the expiration of that time. So a system like this could be applicable to both a console market where maybe your assets are on a PC or your assets are on a laptop, or even if you're storing them on your mobile device, your Saga, for example, and in a hardware Seed Vault. But when you log in on console, it gives you access to those same assets. And then what we really want to accomplish with this, and where part of the rationale for developing out this architecture, is that you really need auto approve. If we're doing 2 million transactions per day, you kind of need an auto approve function to make that gameplay feel seamless and immersive without having to sign a transaction every time you take an action.
Yeah.
And so I think that wallet architecture could work for both cloud computing and for console. The interesting thing about the console wars is that that was largely driven by publishers trying to plant a flag on any particular IP, because that is what drives users to purchase that console. And they historically, this was probably 90s and more 2000s, I guess. They did have exclusive access to IP. And the reason for that is if you wanted to play with your friend the same game in any type of multiplayer session, well, the producer of that hardware wants you to have to buy that. If you own Xbox, they want you to tell your friends, buy an Xbox so that you can play the same game as me. And it was really epic. There's a podcast on this, and I think it's called, I'm forgetting the name of the podcast right now, but they kind of talk through this history, and it was epic. And it might have even been with Fortnite, where they made it so it was kind of accidentally deployed for crossplay, and then you could play across PC and consoles. And then they reeled it back. They said, "Oh, we didn't mean to release that feature, but now you've opened Pandora's box for all of the users saying, well, wait a minute, we can crossplay, but you're just not letting us do it because you want to capture the market share." And so after that event, then it was all of the consumers were demanding crossplay functionality. So we're seeing more crossplay now between PC and consoles, but kind of an interesting history in trying to capture that market share.
I remember when that was first enabled by Fortnite, and then everyone else kind of followed suit. It was like, oh yeah, let me play crossplay and things like that. It's an interesting context. I didn't realize it was kind of an accidental thing. I thought they were, just actively trying to push for it because of some thematic view they had.
Well, I don't know what the actual motivation was, but the way it was positioned in that podcast, at least the PR from Epic was, oh, we didn't mean to push that feature out, but it's better for Epic, obviously. Like Epic wants crossplay, we want crossplay, users want crossplay. The only people that don't want that competition are is Sony and Microsoft, right?
Yeah. I don't want it because I hate competing with people that use a keyboard on Fortnite. It's a lot harder. I only want to compete with controller people. No, but I get it. I mean, it does make sense. One topic I kind of wanted to get into a bit earlier that we didn't get a chance to is just this idea of the tokenomics of Star Atlas. I understand there's dual token structure. You have Atlas. Atlas is the transactional currency, and Polis is more of the governance token. Would just want to unpack a bit, like how you guys thought about architecting the tokenomics side, and where do you go from here? Just given that all of crypto is down so much, and yet these tokens have already been kind of released and are circulating. What happens next, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't obviously speculate at all on the underlying exchange rate of the tokens.
Sure.
Our philosophy is and always has been that we're creating utility for these individually. The reason for the dual token structure is that they have completely different mechanics and intentions within the universe. It doesn't make sense to have a governance-based token also be the medium of exchange throughout the universe. So let me start with the Polis side. There's actually an interesting hierarchy of DAOs and sub-DAOs that will exist in Star Atlas, starting with the Pinaculum DAO. This is top level, and this is really intended for ecosystem governance. So if you were to go to govern.staratlas.com today, there's a couple of features that you can explore, including 2 different lockers, one for Atlas, one for Polis. There's a treasury page where you can see the amount of revenue that the DAO's collected through time based off of game activity. And then there's, we're still working through some of the earliest governance functionality around submitting proposals and voting mechanisms. But at the highest level, anybody who's locked their Polis, and this is on kind of a curve model where the longer you lock and the more you lock, the higher weight you have, the higher your multiplier is within the ecosystem. But that allows for even the smallest players with, say, high conviction and long duration locks to have a higher weight in voting. And what's really interesting is we're out of the total circulating supply of Polis that's out there right now. We have probably 35% of that locked into the locker. And then of that, about 75 or 80% is locked at 5 years, which is the longest duration. So pretty incredible to see that level of conviction of people that are saying, okay, well, we're in this for the long haul. And we also see the potential future benefits of participating in this. But that level of participation will ultimately allow players to drive future development and future evolution of the ecosystem, and even look at things like partnerships and integrations into Star Atlas. The idea right now is that through time, Star Atlas IP actually transitions into ownership and possession of the DAO as well. And there's kind of a financial model behind all of that, but where we sit is effectively managing the IP today on behalf of the DAO and making sure that we can bring our vision to life. And then through time, as development is more robust and kind of the ecosystem is more stable, and we've reached a point where we feel pretty good about what is accessible to players today, we can start to slowly transition that over. Now, within the game as well, there's various forms of political strategy. And this would include capturing territories of space, managing those, being a politician, defining things like taxation rates anywhere else in the universe, or transport lanes. If somebody wants to use a transport lane that you control because of your Polis stake, then they have to pay a tax to you, or you can go around that, but the transport lane might be the fastest path. And so it's faction level, regional level, local level. And then we also have DACs, decentralized autonomous corporations. This is effectively the guild structure of Star Atlas. And so you'll be able to register your DAC on chain as well, recruit members, set permissions for members, and also define systems of taxation for the different members within your guild as well. So that's all on the Polis side. Now, probably the biggest benefit of the way we've structured the economics of the game with respect to Polis is that all of the game activity that takes place when there are transaction fees or forms of taxation that are collected from players, all of that revenue funnels into the DAO. And right now, the DAO is sitting on $1.25 million. At any point in time in the last bull market, it would have been 60, 70, 80 million dollars just based on the tokens that it had collected. And the DAO's been collecting revenue since December of 2021. So we've structured it in a way that the DAO itself, to the extent that there's economic activity and a capture of value of the GDP, it flows and funnels into the DAO. And my vision for that is given we want to encourage co-development and co-creation of this ecosystem, use the DAO assets to run hackathons, to run game jams, to fund other developers that have requested grants, things like that. Let's fuel development around the ecosystem, and let's use the revenue that the DAO is collecting to do that. And then the Atlas side is all obviously in-game currency. So every item and every transaction is denominated in Atlas. It's intended to be that medium of exchange, though, and it's intended to change hands regularly between players. Again, deep layers of complexity. It's virtually impossible for you to do every single thing throughout the game. And in fact, specialization is probably, it's the way that you would likely excel most in the game, especially if you have partners, guild members that are fulfilling other aspects of gameplay that you just aren't able to complete. Hey, I'm really good at mining, and so I'm going to focus all of my resources on mining and bringing those back to the guild. You're really good at in-air combat, and you have fighter ships. You patrol this region for us while I'm doing my mining so I don't get destroyed and lose all those assets. And so it's through all of this specialization, but you also have this currency changing hands pretty regularly as a result of that. And then the final part, of course, is that it is part of the incentive structure, that inflation curve for early compensation and early rewarding of players as we continue to build into this more robust economy.
I just love how sprawling the whole ecosystem will be. And actually, we had Matty Tokenomics on a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said no project should try and create a medium of exchange except for games. And I think you're sort of showcasing why that is and why it's possible with games. One thing I was really keen to just quickly touch on during the interview, but something I heard you say in another podcast, which literally blew my mind, was you had this idea that in order to upgrade some of the people who are on your ship, you would basically be trying to introduce a step-in type feature where you do the exercise in the real world to actually upgrade the players in the game. And to me, it just makes so much more sense, really, than the step-in model of we'll just give you a token, which doesn't really have any utility. In this case, it's like the utility is that the player will improve and then could be sold to somebody else. I just wanted to say, absolutely love that idea, and just see if you have anything else to add.
I'm really excited for the mobile app. When we think about the different implementations, like why we built, I do want to emphasize we're not building multiple products because they do all coalesce in this single universe through on-chain mechanics. So it's not like you're playing in a silo the mobile game, and you're playing in a silo the web game, and you're playing in a silo the Unreal Engine game. All of the assets and all of the items are interoperable and interchangeable. So the mobile fitness app is a way for people to continue to have Star Atlas in their life, even if they're not sitting in front of the PC and playing, or sitting in front of console and playing when that becomes a reality. So we don't call it move to earn. You're not earning anything per se. It's move to progress. I'm out on walks every day, so it's something that's very attractive to me anyway. But the idea is that yes, you can get into the mobile app and you can participate in physical activity that levels up the crew member, and we're designing it in a way that makes that essentially free to play. So anybody in the world with a mobile device that has an interest in participating in the Star Atlas economy can start to level up a crew member. Now, the economic integration is, well, hey, I've leveled this character up to max, and I've found these trinkets that I've slotted into that character. And there's somebody who wants to buy it from me. So let me mint that now. They mint the asset, they pay the minting cost, and they essentially pick up whatever the profit is based on the effort and time that they put into it. Now, why would somebody buy a crew member? Because part of the loadout configuration of ships in both Unreal Engine and in Sage requires crew. It requires crew components and modules. And so if you want a more powerful ship in the game, it's possible the person that wants to purchase convenience, that doesn't want to go out and level the character up themselves, which, by the way, is not the only way you can level up characters. You can also use crew members in-game and get skill proficiency through that. But if you just want you want to compete the best in the racing module, and you just want to get there quickly and not have to go through the process of leveling up, buy that character from someone, put it in your ship, and now you have a slight performance advantage because you've done it. And once again, this is the idea that the person that is producing income, that's producing yield from the crew member, is not because we're putting more Atlas into their wallet or putting more Atlas into the economy. It's because some other player wanted to purchase the efforts of the person that was leveling it up. And so we have the advantage of getting people to think about Star Atlas in their day-to-day lives, even if they're not interested in playing the MMO. Hey, I go on a walk or I go on a bike ride every day. I might as well level up a character while I'm doing it because someone will buy it from me. And I think that's really powerful. The other thing about the mobile app that more of a long-term vision, but I think is exciting, is the idea of AR activations. This is kind of like a Pokemon Go concept a little bit, but think about a space invasion in Amsterdam during Breakpoint. And if you have the mobile app, go to this checkpoint, and if you're there and you help defend against the invasion, you're going to get some XP for your character. And we can do those types of activations all over the world. And again, longer term vision, but that's something that I think people would get excited about, is seeing aliens invading from space and trying to capture a territory that you're helping to defend.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Is creating multiple touch points for people to engage with the ecosystem, whether it's on the go and mobile or in the actual game itself on the computer. Love that. It's awesome. So I guess a final sort of closing question for you here, Michael, because we covered a lot of things, but you've been in the trenches for years now building this game. I'm sure you have a lot of accumulated wisdom, accumulated scar tissue, over the years. Would love to just open the floor if you have any wisdom you'd like to share with other people, whether it's maybe gamers, builders in crypto gaming, any other stakeholders in that world to share with our audience.
I think the probably speak more to the builders, especially those who are feeling discouraged right now, perhaps first time going through a market like this, or you're seeing liquidity and lack of VC interest, or all of that drying up. I think the number one piece of advice that I recommend, and it's probably cliche, but it's perseverance. You just keep pushing. And I've often referenced I've done some triathlon races in the past and competitive cycling and endurance sports. And what's most important is just moving forward, even if it's slow, just taking one step at a time and sticking with it, and it's through the times when you're most discouraged and you feel like you're about to lose and you're about to fail. If you have any ounce of energy and any amount of capital left, keep pushing forward, because new doors open all the time, and you'd be surprised the serendipity of life, how things can turn around for you and how quickly. So I think right now is actually a really promising time, and I'm hoping people start to get encouraged, inspired about the potential. But what it ultimately comes down to, in my opinion, on creating anything is about your passion for the idea itself. So the motivator, I don't believe should be money. Money is a powerful motivator, and I think ultimately we all kind of have this objective of creating wealth off of something that we're building. But I can tell you that all of the people that are at Star Atlas, we just absolutely love what we do, and we're highly motivated and encouraged by this strong, passionate community that we've been able to cultivate. And these guys are a driving force, even in the worst times, wanting to deliver something to people that we can see that they are inspired by. Not just about gameplay, not just about extraction or making money off the game, or even this new paradigm of play to earn, but a dramatic paradigm shift in the way that people interact with each other and socioeconomic dynamics in the world. So just keep moving forward, and things are looking good right now. And I think we've got an exciting couple of years ahead.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, very well said. Thank you for taking the time to join us and talk all things Star Atlas. We're very much looking forward to seeing what's going to drop at Breakpoint. So that should be exciting.
But guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to Unlayered. If you like this podcast and want to help us grow, then please click the follow button and be sure to leave us a review.